And maybe when the word counselor or wonderful come to your mind, we may have different pictures. But a couple things came to my mind. One of those, maybe you're not familiar with the artist, but there's an artist named Sting who has a song called Let Your Soul Be Your Pilot. And it's the song that kind of runs along those veins that when troubles come, and just let your inner self or your soul guide you. But the first thought that came into my mind was Jiminy Cricket. Who, if you've ever seen the movie Pinocchio, says, let your conscience be your guide, right? So I was going to look up the lyrics for Jiminy Cricket, and it turns out that back in 1961, Marvin Gaye released a song called Let Your Conscience Be Your Guide, which I was unfamiliar with, maybe some of you were. So I was listening to a little Marvin Gaye this week in sermon preparation, which may seem completely weird to you, but it's where we went. But we all have this idea of something guiding us, whether it's your soul, whether it's your conscience, and we could weigh out the value of how much do we listen to our conscience. But in the idea of Isaiah chapter 9, the idea of a wonderful counselor is a guide, something that helps us through. For us today, the word counselor has developed a negative connotation. If we would say to a teenager, I want you to see a counselor, that's not going to be received very well, is it? Or if we say we want you to see a marriage or a financial counselor, that usually means bad news. So you see how this word counselor in our culture today has kind of got a negative image to it. When we think of someone seeing a counselor, we think that they're no longer able to deal with their current life circumstances. Which, if you think about it, is really true for all of us. We are unable to deal with our current life circumstances. Without the power of God and a wonderful counselor, we would have no hope in dealing with anything that goes on around us. But when we say to teenagers or families, they're kind of offended and you're kind of hurt. If I was to say to Eileen, I think you need to see a counselor, that's obviously not something I would say in front of all of you, is it? Because it has this negative idea to it. But in Isaiah chapter 9, he says, I've given you a wonderful counselor. For unto us a child is born. And if you look up the dictionary definition of a counselor, it's an advocate or an advisor. Sometimes a defense attorney is called a counsel, or the judge will say counsel may approach the bench, or does counsel have any objections? It's someone who helps you when you are unable to handle all the things yourself. Someone who gives good or wise advice. And it does mean that here in Isaiah 9, but it also means something a little different because we're in English and words don't always come across. And I want to read you some ideas that come behind this idea of wonderful counselor. If you're reading a King James this morning, or a New King James, you probably, and maybe you heard it this way, you've heard this verse so many times, you may have a comma there between the words wonderful and counselor. And for many years, I had always thought there was wonderful, comma, counselor. Well, it turns out in the original language, it's really just one phrase, wonderful counselor, which means he's a good counselor. Here's what it means. It is actually one title in the Hebrew. The two words of this title may be rendered a wonder of a counselor or a wonderful counselor. The term counselor in Hebrew is often used in parallel with king, so that the emphasis here implies that of godlike counsel, of a godlike king. And you remember the verse, I think it's in Proverbs, that with many counselors there's good success. And you'll run across the word counselors a lot of times in the Old Testament. A king had an advisor or a counselor, someone who would give him good advice. And there's stories of when they listened to the counsel and stories of when they didn't. Sometimes the counselor was bad and gave them bad advice. Another idea to think about this, and on two different occasions it talks about this idea of counselor being related to a king. Counselor points to the Messiah as a king who determines upon and carries out a program of action. As a wonderful counselor, the coming Son of David will carry out a royal program that will cause all the world to marvel. And in fact, if you think of it this way, the word counselor as related to a king, look again at verses 6 and 7. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the what? The government will be on his shoulders. He will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Look at verse 7. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness. You see all the words that are associated with a king in there, talking about a throne, talking about a government, talking about justice and righteousness and the decisions that a king makes. Now there are many people in the world today And most of them have opinions about things, if not all of us, right? The difficulty is in finding good counsel. We can always find counsel somewhere. The difficulty is in finding good counsel. Who is the right advice? Who is a good counselor? Who has good advice? Or finding the right voice to listen to. In the book of Isaiah, a couple chapters after this, Isaiah says in chapter 11, verse 2, "And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord." That might be someone who would be a good counselor. The Spirit of the Lord is on him. He has wisdom and understanding, counsel and might, and the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. This is Isaiah 2 chapters later. The book of Job says, "With God are wisdom and might. He has counsel and understanding." In Isaiah chapter 28, verse 29, "This also comes from the Lord of hosts. He is wonderful in counsel and excellent in wisdom." I think I know a place where you can get some good counsel, and you've already received that gift. And Isaiah states it for us over and over and over again. I have a faint memory of the late 70s, early 80s, and I had to go back and research because to make sure that my memory wasn't betraying me. Have you ever had that happen? You think you have a memory of a certain thing, and then you check on it and find out that it either wasn't that at all, and it sometimes was the opposite, or you were close but not quite there. Well, I had a memory of, I guess it was a TV commercial and I looked it up, and I know it's the late 70s, early 80s, of a statement that would be, when E.F. Hutton speaks, people listen. Have you ever heard that? Do you remember that? So I went back and I looked it up. You can watch the commercials still. And so I went back and I watched some of the commercials, and there's these, where are these guys at? I watched a couple of them. I'm confusing the two. But one of these guys are jogging through this busy park, and they're talking about their brokers and their investments and so forth. And the one guy jokes, "Well, my broker is E.F. Hutton." And he says, and everybody in the park is stopping to listen to what E.F. Hutton has to say. And that's where the commercial ends. And then you get the tagline, "When E.F. Hutton speaks, people listen." Apparently, E.F. Hutton was good counsel in the world of brokerage and investments and so forth. And now you're all curious and you want to run home and see those commercials, don't you? I wish I could remember what the second one was because it was even more appropriate, but I can't remember what the setting was. They were someplace really busy. Oh, isn't it? They were in an airport. Two guys walking through an airport, and, the intercom's going off, and people are getting their bags, and going, "Well, my broker's E.F. Hutton," and he says, and it's just quiet in the entire airport, and so everybody wants to know what E.F. Hutton says. So apparently at that time, that was the message that E.F. Hutton was trying to sell. "I am a good counselor. I'm a wonderful counselor." Our problem is that when our wonderful counselor speaks, sometimes he just becomes another voice in the crowd. I think one of the biggest things that Satan has done in our world today has given us so many voices and so much input and so many distractions and things to hear that we can't hear the wonderful counselor. We hear a lot of counselors and a lot of counsel, but we're missing the wonderful one. And that's what's crucial to us, is that his wisdom is so valuable. We must hear our king and our counselor's voice above all others. And I want to encourage you as we come on the Christmas season. I know you're going to hear a lot of things. You're going to see a lot of commercials, a lot of family, a lot of friends, and a lot of things are going on. And we always talk about this every year. And it's really, it kind of ties in with what we've been talking about in Sunday school a little bit, with the Sabbath and the solitude and silence and all those sort of things. But I want you to challenge yourself that in this Christmas season, take some time. Maybe it's every day. Maybe it's once a week. I don't know what your schedules are like. But take some time to listen for your wonderful counselor. And often what he wants to say is just written right in here. And sometimes it takes some time to figure out what exactly is he trying to say. But then this Christmas season, there's a lot of voices competing for your attention. There's a lot of people who want to be heard. A lot of people that want to sell you something. They want to get you to visit their store. They want you to donate to a good cause. And they want you to do this and to watch this or that. And many of them are good things. But none of them is the wonderful counselor. Sometimes, and you've heard this phrase, sometimes the enemy of the best is the good. There are a lot of good things that we can invest our time and our fortunes in this world. But sometimes they're not the best thing. I want us to take time this Christmas season, and you can still do all the things that you're going to do, but you really need to take some time and say, I want to hear the wonderful counselor. I want to hear the best counselor that I can hear. And David realized this when in Psalm 16, he says, I bless the Lord who gives me counsel. In the night also my heart instructs me. Maybe that's happened to you. Maybe you've had a restless night. For me, often when I have to get up out of bed, it's someone is on my mind, someone to pray about, or there's a passage of Scripture, and it's like, I'm not going to sleep until I've got this thing figured out, or whatever it is. And maybe if your wonderful counselor makes house calls in the middle of the night, you should listen. Instead of just, taking a sleeping pill or whatever it is, sacrifice the sleep, and don't go too far, okay? I want you to be rested. I want you to be healthy and all those sort of things. But when your wonderful counselor calls, sometimes it's worthwhile to pick up the phone. And he works 24/7. He doesn't always work right when you want him to at your time of day, when you have time for him. You may be the busiest of your day, and your counselor says, can I speak with you for a second? But this wonderful counselor is more than just a good advice giver. He's more than another voice competing with all the others. You see, as the King of heaven and earth, he has a right to be heard above all others. This little baby, this little king, and then this is the paradox for me, has all the power of heaven and earth and all authority combined in him. So not only is it just another voice that you can choose to listen to, but he has the right to be heard. He created you. His plan and purpose is not just counsel for you to survive from day to day. You realize that the King's plan is bigger than just your little life. Not to damage your fragile self-esteem this morning, but there are many things that God has planned going on in this world that don't involve you. There are many things he has going on that do involve you, and it's your responsibility to hear the counselor when he's asked you to be involved. In Isaiah chapter 14, a few chapters from chapter 9, it says, this is the purpose that is purposed concerning the whole earth. And this is the hand that is stretched out over all the nations. For the Lord of hosts has purposed, and who will annul it? His hand is stretched out, and who will turn it back? Basically, God's going to do what he wants to do, whether you heed his counsel or not. So this little baby born in Bethlehem, with all the fragileness of humanity and the weakness of a human body, still had all the power of an almighty God contained in him. So while he might seem that you can just overlook him as a baby crying in a stable so many years ago, he's also the God creator of heaven and earth who deserves to be heard. Do you see the amazing paradox in this? Sometimes, and if you've been a parent of young children recently, which I know I have fairly recently, I saw Tab and Tab's here. When your kids are crying, it can be the most attention-grabbing thing in the world, especially in the middle of the night. When you have newborns, they tend to cry all night sometimes. But after a while, you can go right on with life while they're crying. You can. And most of you are parents. You know what I'm talking about. When you're a first parent, you want to do everything right. You want to run. Anytime they need something, you want to be there and help them. And then after about 6 months, 8, 9 months of that, you learn to deal with it. So you got to grow up sometime, kid. I'm not going to be here for you every day of your life. And that's sometimes how we are about this baby born in Bethlehem, that we'll listen at first. We'll listen at Christmas time. We'll listen to that wonderful counselor and what he has to say because we're thinking about those things. We want to think about those things. And then at Easter, we'll listen again because we're amazed by the power of this God who can conquer life and death. But then there's May, June, July, August, September, October, November, and we kind of get used to it. We kind of don't think about it. But Isaiah 9's been written there for thousands of years. Isaiah wrote this about 500 years before the birth of the Messiah. You see God's plan? God says, I'm going to have Isaiah tell them about it about 500 years before it's going to happen, more than 500 years before it's going to happen. And then they're going to see my plan happen. And the funny thing is, when Jesus shows up, the Jews miss it. They're looking for this warrior king, and they miss God's big picture, that it goes beyond the little nation of Israel, that also the Gentiles are going to be included, as Jim read this morning in Romans chapter 15. Let the Gentiles have hope. It goes beyond the Jewish nation.